So Hurricane Helene has devastated North Carolina, parts of Georgia, and has made landfall in Florida. Why is that on a tech focused channel? Well, one, you should care as a human. And two, it's going to affect the tech supply chain. Spruce Pine is the only place in the world where there is scaled, pure quality quartz sand that is usable for what is known as the Schochralsky process, which is what we use to make special crystals that you can turn into wafers, that you can turn into chips. Now, if that all sounds like a lot and you're like, oh gosh, there's sand everywhere, why on earth is this hard? I'm going to explain that. We are going to go on a little tour through the entire chip making process. And at the end of it, you're going to understand better why it's so amazing that we have chips at all. All right. So first off, you think to yourself, what is a chip made of? It's made of silicon. Silicon is everywhere because sand is everywhere. It can't be that hard. Pick up some sand and make a chip. That's not how it works. I want you to start by understanding the purity grade that's required to make the chips that are running your computer. We are now at a point where we expect 11 nines of purity. So to give you a sense of what that is roughly one atom being incorrect in billions and billions of atoms, 10 billion atoms or more. That's how pure that silicon has to be. It's one of the purest substances we've ever made as a species. How do you get that? You don't get that by like picking the sand up and like walking into a mill with it. And no, it doesn't work that way. I'm going to walk you through it. You're going to be amazed we ever get chips at all. So first off, you have to have good quality silica deposits. China has some, China makes it. You think to yourself, okay, that's it. So it comes from China like everything else. It does not. There's other crucial components without which you could not make chips that do not come from China. So China makes the silica. China turns the silica into what's called polysilica. Polysilica is very, very pure silica, but it's not crystalline structured silica. So there's a difference electrically between silica that is all jumbled at the chemical level and silica that is orderly. As you would imagine, if you're building circuits, you want orderly silica. But it doesn't just magically appear that way. So this polysilica is already at 8 nines of purity. It's extremely pure, and it's still disordered. So it's not good enough for chips yet, but it's good enough for a lot of other things. So China makes that. That's just one input. Spruce Pine, North Carolina, which is currently underwater, makes another crucial ingredient. It's also sand, but it's for quartz. And the quartz matters because you need high purity quartz for what's called the Schochralsky process. And I did work on pronouncing that, so I hope I got it right. The Schochralsky process is a special process that we've invented to take very pure polysilica, which is 8 nines purity, and turn it into polycrystalline silica, which is actually an ordered chemical structure that's suitable for wafers. And wafers are what we use to make the chips. And so polycrystalline silica actually grows like a crystal. They'd stick a seed crystal about the size of a pencil into the crucible, which is made of the quartz from spruce pine, and they actually rotate it the opposite direction that the crucible is rotating, and it sort of draws out a crystalline structured, extremely pure silicon ingot. And the reason why these sort of have to be the same material, because you're like sand and sand, is because if you don't have very, very pure crucible around the silica, you are going to get impurities from the crucible into the silica. Now, for like almost every application, no one cares if a few atoms get in. But if you are making chips that are down almost to the atomic level already, you do care about the impurities of 1 or 2 atoms. And so you have to have extremely pure crucibles. And that's why Spruce Pine, North Carolina matters. And that's why I personally am somewhat concerned that it is underwater. The human cost is absolutely awful. I have friends, I have family in Appalachia. No one expected this, right? No one expected a hurricane to make landfall in Florida and then dump like the worst rain that Western North Carolina has ever seen, like hundreds of miles inland. Anyway, I will say I looked at the Weather Service forecast. They saw this about 30 hours out, but that was about as good as they could do. we're going to move back to the silicon supply chain. So now you have polycrystalline silica. You've made it with your special process, the Schochralsky process. Use that to impress your friends. Who do you send it to? Well, you send it to TSMC. TSMC is a company in Taiwan that makes cutting-edge chips. Almost all of the cutting-edge 5 nanometer and 3 nanometer chips come from there. And by the way, if you're like, oh, wow, it's actually 3 nanometers. Well, it's more of a marketing term than anything. It's basically the most advanced 2 generations of chip design, because there's not individual features on the chip necessarily that are exactly that dimension of 5 or 3 nanometers. It's just used by people who want to talk about what generation we're on. And so in this case, TSMC makes those advanced chips. They make the advanced chips for GPUs that are used to power inference for large language models, among other things. So you think to yourself, okay, they have these ingots, and then they can sort of work with them. No, the ingots are cut with diamond saws and polished, and then they have to have a special coating put on that enables them to be etched, because they're etched with light to make the circuits. And you might think, oh, so TSMC has the light machine. Well, they do, but they don't make the light machine. A Dutch company named ASML makes the light machine. They are the only ones, as far as I can tell, that make the light machines that do advanced chip production. There's a lot of they are the only ones in this story. And I think part of that is because it is, one, very, very difficult to do this. It is a state of the art. It is a craft. It is not something you can pick up a textbook and know how to do. Materials is really difficult to work with. Like, materials are not software. Materials take experience. There is, this is like a very slight aside, but there's actually someone in Germany who is renowned for having fingers so sensitive that he can sense the scientific instruments that are used to determine smoothness. And so he has like a particular job at an industrial application where he's like basically like sensing smoothness with his fingertips. And I think of that because craft is something that still relies on human expertise, and that is part of why these bottlenecks exist in supply chains. Spruce Pine knows how to take a deposit that they are sitting on and turn it into high quality quartz. That's a bottleneck. We are currently seeing that right now. TSMC knows how to produce chips, not design them, produce them. They are a bottleneck. ASML knows how to make photolithography machines that TSMC can use to etch those chips. They are a bottleneck because of the craft, because it's really difficult to know how to make these things. Okay, moving on. Now we have the chips. Where did you get the design? Well, the design comes from the companies you know and love. So NVIDIA is the one that sends the design to TSMC for new GPUs, and then TSMC makes them. So NVIDIA, for example, launched the Blackwell architecture, which it appears uses the 3 nanometer level of chip fabrication, although that's a little bit obscure right now. But I think we think it's 3 nanometer. And it's called the B100. It's going to be used in the next generation of inference for LLMs. And they're trying to make them buy basically as many as people can buy. There was news that broke of a dinner that Elon Musk and Larry Ellison of Oracle had at Nobu with Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, where they basically sat down at this fancy dinner at Nobu and begged him for computer chips. And that's really the level that we're at, billionaires begging each other for chips. And Jensen has the chips. He has the GPUs necessary for LLMs, and everyone wants them. And then you wonder, how do they get to us? Well, as an example, Oracle is going to be buying piles of these chips because they are building a $100 billion data center. $100 billion data center. And that is going to be powered by 3 nuclear reactors. It's going to be like sucking a gigawatt of power. We're getting to a world of like much, much bigger data centers because LLMs are requiring them. And that means more chips. And that means more TSMC. And more TSMC means more demand for the materials that make these chips. And so this entire conversation is about understanding that our world effectively depends on very specific expertise located in a few companies distributed around the world, in North Carolina, in Amsterdam, or well, in the Netherlands, in Taiwan. And the people who are smart enough to design the chips themselves, who are located often in the US and who like actually architect the chips. Korea also does good chip architecture. So the reason I call this out is because right now, with the Spruce Pine situation, we are seeing the consequences of the tip of the spear innovation in the fragility of our supply chains. If you want to get to a point where you're at 3 nanometers, if you want to get to a point where you're that advanced, you're going to be fragile. There's only a few companies that know how to do it. And that's one of the things we're all sort of living with today. We will see when Spruce Pine comes back online. I am hoping that the town of Spruce Pine comes back online and the people who are there, the hospital that's there comes back online first, because that's more important. But in the meantime, if you can find folks to donate to, if you can find folks to support, people in Western North Carolina need your support and help. And if this story helps you to recognize like how we're all interconnected, that's great, because it's true. All right, cheers.